You're listening to iCannabisRadio.com.
Welcome, welcome. It's Monday night. It's December 10th, 2012. And today is going to be known forever and always in the state of Colorado as Green Day. It is
Yay.
I have some happy people in the studio with me tonight. My producer and dear friend, Chris.
How's it going, Georgia?
It's going well, thank you. And our very good friend and station intern, the man we cannot live without, our friend Sam. What's up, Sam?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you. You know, we're pretty excited today. I was, excited about the show anyway, because we are going to have Talk of the Town's Steve Elliott on as a guest after the first commercial break. And I'm also really excited because in just a few minutes we're going to call this gentleman that we've had on the phone or had on the show quite a few times. His name is Warren Edson. You guys might have heard of him before. He's also my husband. We just had a little an exciting jump down the road today as Governor Hickenlooper signed Amendment 64 into law today without any fanfare. He did nothing other than sign it and declare it and do all those things he's supposed to be doing. So rather than waiting, he could have waited another 25 days, I guess, and he went ahead and signed it into law today. And it was really funny. I was sitting in my store today, MMD of Colorado, and in walks a photographer from the AP. At least that's what he said. And he said, where are the people? Where are the people celebrating? I guess he thought that people were going to be falling out of businesses, out of buildings, onto the streets, smoking marijuana recreationally, having a great time. Where are the people?
No, you can still get in trouble, dude.
Right. There's that. And I said, well, people have jobs. It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. People are working. People are working.
You should have came around 4:20. Yeah.
Well, I kind of said, if there's going to be anything, which I sort of doubt, here's what may happen, but that's kind of overplayed and under exciting and whatever. We lost our pirated Wi-Fi, by the way. I know. Anyway, so we are going to give Warren a call in just a minute. We're going to talk about, what it's going to look like in Colorado and what this means, and just kind of some news in general. And then we are going to ring our friend Steve Elliott, and we're going to talk about, as you know, in Washington State, it went into effect, and there was parties in the street and those kinds of things. But that was because they knew that, once the clock turned to that specific day, then marijuana was going to be decriminalized, and still isn't cool or legal to smoke in the streets or in public or any of those kinds of things. But people did go pretty nutty, and of course, how reporters love to see, the people blowing smoke from, these big Bob Marley joints or, whatever. But it's all right. It's a huge step in the right directions, if you ask me. What do you think?
I think it's an awesome step.
They were fighting for this. They deserve to celebrate.
That's right. Right.
It's about time. It's about time.
I mean, it was 12 midnight, so it's not like there's children playing. And
that's right. They didn't do it in front of a school bus full of children visiting the Space Needle. You're definitely right about that. So, shall we go ahead and give Mr. Edson a phone call? Warren Edson is an attorney in Colorado who has been an activist both personally and professionally in the legalization movement for about as long as he's been an adult.
Hello?
Hi, Warren. You're live on iCannabis Radio.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Okay.
Chris and Sam are here, and they are super excited to talk to you as well.
How's it going, Warren?
Hello.
Hey, guys.
The mood in Denver, or I should say, the mood in iCannabis Radio is one of celebration and happiness. But we were just talking about how I had a photographer from the AP come in the store today wondering where all the people are. And Warren, there wasn't this mass celebration. What do you make of that?
Well, frankly, more power to Colorado for not going out there and doing stupid stuff. I mean, it's not legal to smoke in public. As much as people might think that's fun, it's still not legal. And, just doesn't set the best precedent for legalization.
Absolutely, absolutely. So tell me a little bit about what this means, what the governor did today, and how that changes life in Colorado.
Well, the governor signed 64 into law, so now marijuana is generally legal in Colorado, up to an ounce for folks 21 and under.
Over.
Excuse me. That's simple possession, though. You can give away up to an ounce to another individual who is 21 or over. You can't sell it.
And selling it doesn't just mean money, is that right?
No, it talks about no remuneration. So technically, no trades, no barter. Just can't sell it. You can give it away. Just like if a friend came over to your house, you could give them a beer, but you couldn't sell them a beer.
Awesome. So that means if I have this really cute hat that Chris wants, I can't give him the hat in exchange for a gram.
No.
Because that's remuneration.
Correct. And you couldn't trade shoveling his sidewalk for a gram either.
Yeah, I'm not shoveling your sidewalk, Chris. Stop asking me.
I love shoveling.
I mean, like physical labor, because some people think about physical items. Like I'll trade you my bicycle, or like in your example, a hat. But that also includes labor.
A service.
Now, it does. This 64 also allows adults 21 and up to grow up to 6 plants as well.
And so one of the questions, because of course, as you can imagine, at MMD today, as soon as the public knew about this, because part of you can say yes, good job, Colorado. Part of what happened though was that people didn't know that today was going to be the day that the governor was going to sign this. He didn't do what sometimes happens with exciting legislation. He didn't say today was going to be the day, so there weren't a lot of press at the Capitol, and people weren't preparing for the signature and those kinds of things. So as soon as the news kind of got out, the phone at the dispensary started ringing like crazy because people had a whole bunch of questions. People, first of all, wanted to know if they could come into the dispensary and buy today.
No, obviously.
No, obviously.
I mean, there won't be retail stores for a year. And
that's because?
That's the way 64 is written. There has to be, the micro rules need to be made by the legislature, and they're supposed to make licenses available by October and issue them by January 1st, 2014.
So as you said earlier, the changes that are going to happen today are really just the personal possession. So the other question that I got a lot today.
And growing. But now, while we're on growing, though, let's add that Colorado Revised Statute 186-401 did not change. And what I mean by that is Section C1 says, quote, a person commits child abuse if in the presence of a child or on the premises where a child is found or where a child resides or in a vehicle containing a child, the person knowingly engages in the manufacture or attempted manufacture of a controlled substance as defined by 1818-1025, which is Schedule I drugs, and marijuana is part of that. So even though 64 went through and you can legally possess it and you can legally grow, technically if you grow in a place where a child is, that constitutes child abuse still. And it doesn't require a showing of harm or a showing of threat or even knowledge by the child.
So why is it that people don't know this? I mean, people think now that they're free to move about their growing business and no one's going to interfere.
Well, it's just about a matter of connecting the dots.
Okay.
On a broad-based level, 64 legalized a bunch of this stuff, but other laws need to be adjusted or not, depending on what the public and the legislature wants to do, to reflect the change.
Do you think there's going to be any movement to change that particular piece so that it's not
I hope there is. And some of your loyal listeners would remember way back when you had Dan Murphy, the local Denver attorney, on.
Yep.
Because he talked about the Joseph Lightfoot case,
right,
which was the prime example. Of a guy who got in trouble for having plants in his house with his children present, even though there was no showing of harm.
Yeah.
And It sits there. I mean, if you followed the issue, it relates to meth laws that were created and just written over broadly, so they also applied to things like this, but it's there. And I'm hoping that activists will now, including fighting the DUID regulations that are coming, focus on this and remind their state legislators and representatives that this should be changed to more accurately reflect things. And all they have to do is add harm. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to say that a child should be put at risk because of a grow, whether it's because drowning in big buckets or possible electrocution or something. But, I mean, this is written so there isn't even a requirement of harm.
Because harm itself could be pretty broad. I mean, the exposure to chemicals, for example, even though even though nothing's actually happened, that has potential to be harmful.
Well, and what I'm talking about is if the federal or the state government is going to charge you with child abuse, that they actually have to show that there's some abuse towards your child through your act.
Right.
I mean, because this doesn't require it. I mean, simply there's a grow behind 6 locked doors in the basement that the kid doesn't even know about, but you can be charged with child abuse.
I think that is something that I'm so glad that you brought that up, because people don't realize it. People don't know that, and they're going to find themselves in a situation that they thought that they were protected from.
Yeah, and they're going to be shocked to find out that it's strict liability. Again, I can't emphasize it enough. No need to show harm. No need to show the kid even knew.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, it's going to be somebody who probably didn't put their kid at harm, didn't put their kid at risk, but was a smart ass with law enforcement or with social services saying, hey, I'm within my rights, it's in the Constitution, and those suckers in social services will sicker and say, haha, it might be, but let me remind you of this, and whack them upside the head with a child abuse charge.
Yeah. Oh, that's really scary. That's really scary. So before we go to our break and call Steve, I want to get your opinion a little bit on the situation with that was all over the news today and yesterday. The college students who thought it was a good idea to bring THC brownies that they had made themselves to their history class at University of Colorado. 2 students made pot brownies, brought them to class, didn't tell anybody. There were 12 people in the class, including and a professor, and 8 of them got, and I'm using quotes, they got sick. Well, they had no idea what was going on, and understandably freaked out. What's your take on the situation?
Well, I mean, I think Mason Pavert said it well when he compared it to, somebody spiking the punch bowl at a dance. Even though at a dance, I think there's a little more anticipation that the punch bowl might be spiked. On top of the fact that that's illegal distribution and all that fun stuff, they're real lucky that somebody didn't get in a car and drive and kill somebody or hurt somebody or themselves or,
Well, that's the professor's big issue, is that she was going to go pick up her kids after class, and luckily started feeling the effects beforehand, and recognized that she shouldn't do that. So,
okay, a prime example.
Yeah.
If she didn't recognize the effects and thought, geez, maybe I ate the wrong thing this morning, I'm a little lightheaded, and then went and picked up the kids and got whacked upside the head with an edible, you could have had some serious injury to children.
So the comments on the article online range from extreme to extreme. Put these kids in prison to, come on, really, no terrible thing. It's not like anybody died. And I certainly don't believe in any of the extremes, and feel like, these kids, what they did wasn't a prank. It was a really bad idea, and some punishment should be attached to it. But they're facing felony charges.
Well, again, you're intoxicating somebody else without their permission. Certainly when we talk about roofies and somebody doing that in a bar to an unsuspecting female, we have a whole lot more serious discussion than we're having now.
Oh, that's true.
So, in part, the joke nature of pot brownies kind of tones down the whole thing. I'm not sure that's appropriate either.
I think that's a really
again,
good
we
point.
could have ended up with kids being hurt. We could have ended up with that mother having her kids taken away from her. And then what happens? She goes to social services and says, I didn't know, they gave it to me. And social services laughs her out of the room saying, yeah, right.
Right.
But it's one of those few cases where she really didn't.
Right. Exactly.
The old, oh, it's not mine, it's his. Wow. In this case, it really was his.
The dog did eat the homework.
Mm-hmm.
So any gut feeling on what's going to happen to these kids?
It is Stan Garnett up in Boulder, so we can be pretty assured that he'll take a solid, honest look at this. At the same time, this is setting some precedent that I'm not sure the kids want to be setting. And I'm not going to guess because that gets into a whole bunch of other issues and what they look at. Hopefully they will get probation, but there's a good chance that they're looking at a felony and some time here.
Warren, we're going to take a quick break. So if you could just hold on the line and be very, very quiet.
Yep.
We will, when we come back, we're going to call Steve Elliott. Right now, we are going to thank some of our sponsors, including Cuffle Collimore and Company. They're able to provide commercial general liability and property insurance to dispensaries and growers. If you need insurance, or if you don't know if you have good insurance, Cuffle Collimore is the company to call. They can provide up to $1 million of commercial general liability insurance. That's used if someone sues you because you've been injured on your premises or because they claim that the product that they got from you made you sick. They can also provide property insurance. Covers direct physical loss to the business personal property, or the loss of business income can be included as well. Be sure to call them for a quote. Their number is 877-335-1234. That's 877-335-1234 and ask for Bob, or email at rtc@iwic.net. Cuffle Collimore and Company, providing your general commercial liability and property insurance. So as you know, it's ski season and we've been getting some snow. So please, 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 on your way up to the mountains, make sure you stop by and visit Jerry and Aaron at Medical Marijuana of the Rockies. Medical Marijuana of the Rockies is your mountain source for meds. Be sure to check out their website, mmrockies.com, for their latest selection of immature plants as well as their strain selection, which changes every single day. They are located off of exit 203 in Frisco, Colorado, right behind the Big O Tires. That's Medical Marijuana of the Rockies, mmrockies.com. You're listening to iCannabis Radio. I'm Georgia, and we'll be back in a flash.
Are you a medical marijuana patient or interested in finding out how to become one? Contact Mile High Wellness, where your care is our concern. Conveniently located on Hamden and Tamarack in the Whole Foods parking lot behind Proof of the Pudding. Mile High Wellness offers a wide variety of edibles, hashes, and some of Colorado's top strains. Mile High Wellness, where your care is our concern. 3525 South Tamarack, Suite 110, on the corner of Hamden and Tamarack. 720-382-8516. Mile High Wellness, where your care is our concern.
You're listening to Georgia Edson on iCannabisRadio.com.
I love that bumper. That's so great. Warren, we're back. We're gonna go ahead. We're gonna go ahead and call Steve, and we're gonna talk a little bit about. This is the old-fashioned, non-technologically advanced way to call somebody during the show. And then we're gonna hear it ring in just a second. But we're going to talk to Steve a little bit about how he got started in his activism. And then we want to talk, compare and contrast, Warren, what's going on with Colorado and what's going on with Washington. Because there are some similarities, but there's definitely some differences. And they have, a 5-day jump on us, too. So, the feds are going to look at them first is what I'm thinking. That's just
Hello?
I guess. Hi, Steve. You're live on iCannabis Radio.
Hi, how are you doing, Georgia?
Good, thank you. You're on the phone with Warren.
Hey, Steve.
And
Maybe.
so I was just saying that I wanted Warren to be on the phone with you as well tonight because we want to do a little comparing and contrasting of Washington State and Colorado. But first, I've had you on the show several times, and we've never really talked about how you got to be the activist that you are and the voice that you are. What kind of brought you to being Mr. Toke of the Town?
I was involved in the straight journalism world for a number of years. That's what I took in college back in the late 70s, early 80s. And for a long time, it was in newspapers and then in trade magazines in Southern California. A criminal conviction in Southern California made me practically unemployable in the corporate world.
Wow.
So I had some free time on my hands when I got out of jail. What I did with that was start a blog centering on civil liberties and cannabis called Reality Catcher. And what happened with that blog was I learned that there was a social media news sharing site called dig.com at the time, where if you got on the front page of Dig by the users of the site voting your story up, your submission, then it would get a ton of page hits. And of course, with my new blog that nobody had ever heard of, I wanted people to read my stuff.
Sure.
So I kind of learned the ropes at Dig. I learned how to submit a story and how once you submit it to forge alliances with other users, to promote your story through social media, and to get enough votes on that thing so that it kind of rose through the charts. And before long, I had enough of the formula down that I was able to get my material on the front page of Dig. With that came enormous page hits for a guy, at least for a guy at my level of blogging. Typically 20,000 to 50,000 page hits came along with each front page story.
Wow.
After I got a couple of those on Dig, it got some attention from the right people. It turns out that Village Voice Media had something akin to a talent scout online watching this stuff. And it further turns out that they had been examining the idea of having a cannabis writer write a column a couple of times a week for the San Francisco Weekly. So they asked me if I was interested in doing that. Of course, I leaped at the chance.
Sure.
At the time, I had been unemployed for 2 years. So that gig went really well. That was in early 2009.
Okay.
For a few months, I did that column for the San Francisco Weekly, which was called Chronic City. And what that turned into eventually was the opportunity to do Talk of the Town, because that entire time, the top guys at Village Voice Media had been kind of gestating the idea of a national pot blog. That idea was bounced around, and it finally got the go-ahead. And in November, late November of 2009, Talk of the Town first appeared, and of course, once again, I had leaped at the chance when they offered me the position of editor of Talk of the Town. I didn't have to think twice. And Bill Jensen, the guy who was then in charge of Village Voice Media's online presence worldwide, told me, just get us page hits. And he said, however, whatever you have to do to get us page hits. Well, I took that as pretty much a blank slate and a great opportunity. So I thought, if I really bring the latest and best cannabis news to the people, and if I tell it like it is, at least from my viewpoint, and I don't pull any punches, and I actually lay it on the line the way I believe it to be, that must have an audience. And 3 years later now, it turns out that it does have an audience.
Absolutely.
And there are people who appreciate that kind of, gloves off reporting when it comes to the marijuana scene. I think we need that sort of honesty, because there is way too much BS and way too much political grooming going on all sides, and not enough truth-telling. So, of course, a few feathers get ruffled along the way, but, that's the price of admission if you want to tell it like it is.
Well, I think it's more than I'm a fan. I'm not just an audience. I'm a fan. You have fans, people who like me, not just appreciate your candor, but look to you for news and helping. You help me shape my opinions. That's what you're supposed to do, and that's what I trust you to do. Is help me determine how I feel about a subject. You do.
I consider that a privilege, and I'm greatly honored that I can play a part in helping people form informed opinions.
Yeah.
Even if they disagree with me,
right.
If I made them think on the way to forming their opinion, then my effort hasn't been totally wasted.
Absolutely. Well, and it's interesting. We talked before 502 passed. We've talked since 502 has passed, and And this is a blessing and a curse for you personally and for Washington State. But now you've got it. Now it's signed into law. What's the feel in the air in Washington right now?
I think what we're seeing right now is some cautious optimism as we see certain good effects. Some of the early effects of I-502's passage have been undeniably positive. Like there have been a few hundred pending marijuana possession cases statewide that have been dismissed by prosecutors because they rightly and logically said, since this is about to be legal, then why do we want to spend state resources pursuing this case? So more than 200 people so far statewide have seen their cases disappear. They don't have to worry about that simple marijuana possession case anymore. That's a very good thing. We don't need to disrupt people's lives over something as inconsequential as possession of less than an ounce of marijuana. Another thing that is actually on top of the town today and is causing raised eyebrows and some optimism is one guy that owns a place called Frankie's Sports Bar and Grill.
That's on my list to talk about. Yep.
Has invited pot smokers to come smoke their weed at his place, and he fought the state and won in 2010 to have a smoking area upstairs from his bar. The state had regulations that you couldn't have tobacco smoking within 25 feet of the entrance of your establishment, and you couldn't have it in the bar itself. So this guy is smart. He has an upstairs space that he designated as his smoking area. It's more than 25 feet from the entrance, so it fulfills that obligation. And it's not the bar itself because it's like a separate club. It's Friends of Frank Club.
Yep.
They pay $10 a year to go upstairs and smoke their tobacco. Well, of course, he's a businessman, and he wants more people in his bar, and he saw a big opportunity. And, he was one of the people who had the initiative and the chutzpah to step forward and say, you pay me the $10 a year. Marijuana is legal now in Washington. You go upstairs and you smoke your marijuana in my bar. And then if you want alcohol while you're doing that, we'll sell that to you. So that's he started that. The first people I know of that smoked pot in there were Friday. There has been no enforcement action so far, and I think right now the authorities are trying to decide what to do with this guy.
Well,
because 502 formally prohibits public use of marijuana. So I think right now what we're about to see defined in the courts or otherwise is what exactly public use constitutes. Do people in a private club where they have paid for the privilege of being there, does that constitute public use or not? In my opinion, and obviously in Frank's opinion, it does not. I think there are some who might try to pursue the other angle on that, though.
I guess my issue would be more, though, and I'm not a licensed attorney in Washington, how it would affect his liquor license. Because generally you aren't allowed to break federal law and still have a liquor license.
Mm-hmm. That could very well be a factor, and once that comes to his attention, who knows what he'll do. Right now, the guy, though, is getting a dream load of publicity worldwide because he was the first one to step forward and do this. Some people are expecting other bar owners to do it as well if the sky doesn't fall on Frank.
Well, Frank has
If
a
it does,
big pair of balls,
in the
let's
form
be
of losing
honest.
his liquor license, then I guess that would effectively nip this in the bud. If not, though, it could be the beginning of something.
It's
As
interesting.
George is aware, we actually had our enforcement division in Colorado for medical marijuana is under the Department of Revenue, just like our alcohol is. And so some of the bars in Denver who, let's just say, were a little loosey-goosey with their allowing or ignoring medical marijuana users got actual visit from the Department of Revenue saying, hey, let's remind you that we also control alcohol. And if you do this again, we're going to have an issue with your liquor license.
There were several bars in town that were known to host events, and medical marijuana patients would medicate on site, not with the permission of the bar, but with the look the other way of the bar. And those places were known pretty strongly. And yeah, that's changed pretty radically over the past. I don't know. I guess that happened about 6 weeks ago.
6 months ago, probably.
6 months ago?
It was like last spring.
Was it that long? So the interesting thing about Frankie's Sports Pub is in the article that I was reading on NBCnews.com, the spokeswoman for the U.S. Attorney's Office in Seattle says that while marijuana remains illegal under federal law, quote, I can't tell you whether what he's doing is legal or not. And then Tom Morell, who is the Olympia's city attorney, said, quote, we're looking into it. There are a lot of changes in state law right now. That's all I can say. They don't know what to do with this guy. He's got this.
I think they're still trying to formulate an official response. So it's very interesting to watch it all unfold. There is no script. There is no precedent. Yep. So it's an exciting time of history.
It's a fantastic business model. I know that's one of the things that has been talked about a lot in Colorado. And in fact, Warren, what was the day that there was the editorial in the Denver Post denouncing a week ago denouncing there was an attorney in town, Rob Corey, who has been very successful in defending some medical marijuana criminal cases, and he has been touting the tourism aspect and how bars and clubs and those kinds of things are just going to open willy-nilly, and this editorial really shut him down and said, wow, this wasn't what the people voted for. Rules haven't been promulgated yet. I think that you've really overstepped your bounds, and in all reality, just be happy with what you got. But I think that it's human nature to say, even if you grasp the big victory that these two states have had, I think it's human nature to want a little bit more, to want to be able to be like Frank and say, he talks about the fact that his business was suffering, and the reason why he went forth to have the tobacco smoking area was to help increase his business. It's
right, and not only human nature, as you correctly say, but also the nature of capitalism, that when a new law, presents this window of opportunity to establish a new business paradigm and to see if it flies under the theory that it's easier to get forgiveness than permission, then there are going to be some businessmen who are willing to put themselves on the line to take the chance that they might be able to do this.
Right, and of course the other side of that coin is that we just have to be very, very careful. We have stepped into this new territory that we are so lucky to be in, and we've worked so hard to get the votes to be in. Let's not mess it up now. We were talking before we had you on that there were some college students at the University of Colorado who gave some pot brownies to their classmates and their professor without telling them, and of course the first thing that happens is everyone attributes it to Amendment 64 or wonders if they want to make that connection. Everyone's watching us. We're under the microscope. Let's be smart. Let's be thoughtful. If there's a legal way for Frank to maintain that business, that's fantastic. And I applaud him for taking that risk. But I don't want people to then say, okay, well, you know what? I'm gonna do something else radical to push the envelope that will ultimately have us backtrack. We've made so much progress. Let's keep moving forward.
Right. You don't want to.
Go, Steve.
You don't want to get that pendulum swinging against you, for sure.
Yeah, it hurts when it hits you. Yeah. Warren, what were you going to say?
Just as an interesting side note, in case the listeners weren't aware, and frankly I don't think many people are, that mixing alcohol and marijuana isn't even something that's kosher anymore in Amsterdam, where the government, even, I'm not talking about the weed pass or any of that stuff, but the government has really cranked down on marijuana smoking around alcohol use. To the point where I think there's only 2 places left in Amsterdam that are brave enough to mix the two.
I'm really glad that you brought that up because, and Steve, I don't know if this is happening in Washington as well, but there are a lot of people who are opposed to 64 in Colorado, and of that group, there are people who are very pro legalization but didn't like 64 as a measure. So every little thing they're nitpicking. oh my gosh, don't smoke in public because you can't do that. Oh my gosh, all those people who are under the age of 21, they don't get to freely smoke. And we need to point out this is regulated like alcohol. And if you're under the age of 21, you can't drink. You can't drink freely you can't walk down the street with a beer. I mean, this is regulated in a way that's palatable to most people. And so why people have to say, you know what, I don't want any regulation is outrageous. Warren always uses the example of you can't grow tomatoes in your garden and turn around and sell them at the Safeway. You can't do that. But people want that, and so they complain because they don't have that.
I think that there is going to be that kind of pushback against any cannabis regulation whatsoever, not only because of human nature, but because of the nature of the cannabis community and the fact that it includes lots of nonconformists. But you're right in that, in a society where we have to come to a consensus that for the foreseeable future, we are going to have to include the opinions of those who believe that cannabis is possibly harmful and or dangerous in some way. If we ignore the fact that there is a segment of the populace that believes those things, then we do so at our own peril. And as you say, this could come back to bite us if we scare people badly enough.
That's right. So I want to go back for a second. Warren, Washington is now ahead of us by several days. Do you think that any of the decisions that are made in Colorado are going to be based on what happens in Washington State? If Frankie's Sports Pub is allowed to have to go ahead and have his recreational smokers room, do you think that that's going to in any way affect what Colorado decides to do?
I think it very well could.
It could, but also it's different because here those regulations are controlled by the local authorities, not necessarily by the state. So we've seen Denver say they'd frown upon it. But just last Tuesday we saw Boulder say, oh, we'd think about it, but they'd have to serve food, which was the oddest additional quote.
Why would you go if they didn't serve food?
I mean, that, in terms of the weed bar thing, that's going to be a local issue here in Colorado because we're a home rule state. In terms of the overall thing, I think that business folks here in Colorado will watch Washington because their retail model clicks in months before us. But they'll be watching it mainly to see if the feds come running in. Right. Because, if they do, then folks here won't be converting their medical marijuana license over into a recreational license. But the other thing is Washington, those folks voted on 60-plus pages of rules already. Right. So most of theirs is written. I can't imagine our legislature would look at that language as something they'd adopt when they already themselves created their own MMJ language, which would be much more likely something that they'd tweak and adopt and switch over. But yeah,
right.
There's something a little bit. I'm not a huge risk taker, so recognize that. There's something a little bit relieving to me to be able to say, okay, well, if Washington managed to have it work, then maybe we're a little bit safer too, and that's probably naive, especially since we saw what happened in with the feds and raiding medical marijuana centers across the country, but there is something a little bit. I'm glad that you guys are braving the road for us, Steve.
It feels kind of like being the point man in a patrol where if something happens, you're going to be the guy who steps on the grenade.
Sorry, yeah.
I can only hope that things go well and smoothly and that the federal government stands down and lets the will of the people be enacted. It is going to be very interesting, though, for so many reasons. One of the things I've been thinking about is the fact that, under 502, which is now being implemented here in Washington, the State Liquor Control Board is the agency that controls the distribution and retail sale of marijuana once that comes into effect sometime after December 2013. Well, of course, the State Liquor Control Board doesn't know anything about retailing marijuana. They know about retailing alcohol.
Right.
So that's the model they have to work with. They were just 2 years ago, I believe, taken out of the alcohol business by the state's voters. So now they have a whole other mission, that is to retail marijuana to adults in Washington. Now, since they don't really know the ins and outs of the specificities of the retail marijuana business, I have been told by one dispensary operator in Olympia that she's been approached by the State Liquor Control Board and asked for advice on how they should retail marijuana once that system comes into being here in Washington State. So actually, I was very glad to hear that, because rather than reinventing the wheel
Right.
from a position of knowing nothing about what has worked and what hasn't when it comes to distributing marijuana within Washington State, at least they're asking people who have some experience in that regard. That is heartening to me. I hope they listen to the advice that these people offer them.
Yeah, I agree. You know, Colorado the governor just named a task force for implementing Amendment 64's retail side, and I mean, I don't really know any of the members of this task force. Warren, you could probably help me out. But one of the things that was sort of a disappointment when the medical marijuana task force was put together to promulgate recommendations for those rules, there were a lot of people from the industry who had a vast amount of knowledge and experience. This is a lot of people who hold government positions on this task force. And so when reading the members, I'm hoping that this means that they're going to be doing some appropriate cutting and pasting from our medical marijuana rules, because that would make sense. If they're not, and Warren, you can tell me whether or not you agree. If they're not going to cut and paste, then there aren't the people on this board that have the working knowledge of the industry and of the retail side and all those kinds of things that are going to be able to be helpful.
Well, and keep in mind, whatever rules they make aren't really rules. They're just recommendation to the Department of Revenue and the Medical Marijuana Enforcement Division as to what the rules should look like.
Yeah.
And we saw from the last round of rulemaking, just because recommendations are made doesn't mean the rules will look like that in any way, shape, or form. And we had tons of folks spend tons of time, hundreds of hours creating rules that just disappeared.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Wow.
So, gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to hold on with me for just a few minutes, if you don't mind. We need to take a quick break. It'll give you guys a chance to get a drink of water, to pat your dog, to go potty, any of those kinds of things. And we're going to be right back. We're going to thank our sponsor, Nodo Urban Garden Supply. It is your downtown Denver's favorite hydroponics store, located at 1330 27th Street, between Larimer and Walnut Street, right down the street from MMD of Colorado. You know, folks, it is now, as of today, legal for people age 21 and over to grow your 6 plants. You want to learn how to do that? You want to know the supplies that you need? You ought to go down to Nodo. Give them a call. Check out their website, NODO urbangardensupply.com. They're open Monday through Saturday. Check them out. Go visit them. Make sure that you tell them that you heard about them on iCannabis Radio. They will treat you great. They have all the products you could possibly need in stock. And they are wonderful, nice, educated, knowledgeable folks. Go visit our friends at Nodo Urban Garden Supply. You're listening to iCannabis Radio, and we'll be back in a flash.
The law offices of Edson, Maton, and Matz provide criminal defense, medical marijuana defense, and advice about setting up and running medical marijuana centers, optional premises cultivation operations, and infused product manufacturing businesses throughout Colorado. With offices in Denver and Aspen, we can offer assistance throughout the entire state of Colorado. Give us a call at 303-831-8188. That's 303-831-8188. Or visit us online at warrenedson.com.
I'm Gary Johnson, and you're listening to iCannabis Radio, and I want to say, talk it up, Colorado.
So we talked it up, Colorado, and thanks, Gary Johnson. We are, as of today, the second state in the union to legalize marijuana. We're on air tonight with one of my favorite guests, Steve Elliott, a Toke of the Town, and my absolute favorite guest, Warren Edson. Hi. We're back. Are you gentlemen back?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, still here.
So when we left, we were talking a little bit about making the rules to put these recreational retail spots in place. And Steve, you guys are going to do this much quicker than Colorado is, because as Warren mentioned, 502 came with the rules. 64 was a skeleton framework, but 502 came with the rules. So what's your timeline for retail stores?
They will start the discussions in the rulemaking right now. Well, the discussions will be going on for the next year until December 2013.
Okay.
The rulemaking starts in December 2013, a year from now. And right now, I don't see a clear timeline for how long they might take to do that.
Okay.
I do see estimates that retail stores will be opening up in early 2014. Now, will that mean January or May 2014? We don't know that yet. We don't know how much they're going to wrangle over the final details, but we hope, since, as Warren pointed out, we passed a 60-page initiative, that some of those details should be taken care of already, and that hopefully we'll have retail availability sometime in the first half of 2014.
So that's similar to our timeline.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Warren, what do you think our process is going to look like?
Well, as we kind of talked about, the legislature has to make the rules, and they have to make them quick. Public comment should happen that second week of March, so things will come together, as I said, real quick, and the feds will either step in or they won't, and if they don't, it's going to get real interesting.
What do you two think about the fact that now here we are, both states have passed it into law, and there hasn't been a giant hammer. To my knowledge, there hasn't even been a soft smack. What are we to make of that?
I think right now, I get the distinct impression that the federal authorities are kind of rocked back on their heels.
Mm-hmm.
I get the feeling that they just had their hair parted by the margin of victory in Colorado and Washington.
Yeah.
And they are still trying to figure out their next move. Even as we're trying to figure out what they're going to do, so are they.
Yeah.
I think that it could really swing either way at this point if past history is any indication, and of course it may not be, since we have no clear precedent of legalization at this level, then that they are going to choose the route of repression. If they follow the example that they have done with medical marijuana, then there will be targets selected and there will be enforcement actions. That's the pessimistic view. One can also hope that they don't need a weatherman to know which way the wind blows, and they might have enough cognizance of political reality to see that they are sealing their own fate if they try to swim against this tide. Within a few years, there are going to be a lot more people taking power into their own hands and legalizing marijuana on the statewide level. Now, are you going to stand in front of this freight train and hold up a stop sign? If you're the federal government, are you going to get out of the way and let the people express their will? That's going to be an increasingly urgent question, I think, as we go forward. And it's going to be an increasingly untenable position from which the federal government is going to be operating.
So, Warren, what do you think? Steve essentially just said that politically, it's minor suicide. It could potentially be minor suicide to stand in the way of the will of the voters in this particular issue. What do you think?
Well, I guess that cuts both ways, because while it's political suicide to stand in the way, we have a whole bunch of international treaties and funding and all sorts of stuff that hinges on marijuana remaining illegal. And we've already seen grumbling coming out of Mexico and South America saying, you guys have been giving us crap for years and you're doing this. So, that's where the pessimist in me says calls are being made to at least Colorado saying, hey, if you actually issue these licenses, we'll issue an injunction, we being the feds, and so you better not even waste your time. But we'll see.
It's
interestingly, we've also seen some negative feedback from the United Nations organization itself, where one official actually called for the United States to cancel the election results in Colorado and Washington, and said basically you can't do that when it comes to legalizing marijuana. There was a guy on the International Narcotics Control Board, which is an arm of the UN, operated by the UN, dude named Raymond Yans, and he said, basically you can't do that. You need to cancel these election results. He was, of course, hooted down by the pro-pot people, but it does show one disturbing fact, that the UN seems dangerously regressive when it comes to drug policies, particularly cannabis policies.
And you think that's because, what's their motivation?
The 1961 treaty that Warren alluded to, you have a treaty that basically every nation on earth signed over 50 years ago that says we will not unilaterally legalize drugs, any of us, without all agreeing to it. And it pretty much, Anslinger believed in 1961 that he had ensured the prohibition of marijuana forever by getting that international agreement. There are some who are inclined to agree with him. I think that once we get past the idea that we can't do that, then we can do that.
So,
and it's just going to be interesting to see if there's a trickle-down effect with things having nothing to do with weed, but other countries saying, hey, if the U.S. can blow off this treaty, we're going to blow off this treaty as well, and you'd better not kick us out of the United Nations because of this.
Do you think it's going to go that
far?
I
agree, and I think that there may be a domino effect once they see that if we get away with it and the United Nations doesn't impose sanctions, which would be entertaining on its own level if they did that, but I think that a lot more countries are going to feel less bound by that 1961 Single Convention Treaty.
Well, I'm talking above and beyond that, too, because it could affect, the Cato Convention, whatever it is, with CO2 emissions. It could affect, the argument going on with women's rights in various Arabic nations. There are a number of different treaties that folks have signed that we depend on them to be a part of, that could be a trickle-down effect. Hey, if they aren't going to follow this weed thing, why should we care about this other stuff? But we'll see.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
exactly.
And that's certainly more than the voter in either state was thinking about when they were voting for an increase in their personal freedoms.
Mm-hmm. I suspect that a lot of the voters, especially the libertarian-leaning voters in both states, if they had known that the UN objected to this thing, they would have even been more motivated to get out and vote for it.
Well, that's actually the only people I heard talking about that. I did hear the libertarians, the anti-government folks talking about, hey, this is the interesting thing, UN treaty, getting in the way of it. So there was a little bit of rumbling. It also shows the disorganization of the opponents of legalization, because you would have thought that would have been something they'd been bringing up to the average Joe soccer mom or whatever.
Well, no,
that's an excellent point.
The only thing
that, and there was almost no organized opposition to I-502 in Washington, which just really, it shocks me that there wouldn't have been a more organized opposition to a societal change of this magnitude.
Well, and the organized opposition in Colorado really centered around parents who have children who have suffered from addiction, who have had dangerous, awful consequences happen because of their drug addiction, that they all attribute to marijuana being a gateway drug. Really, It was about pulling on the heartstrings of people everywhere. What about the children? We can't do this because of the children. It's not safe for the children. And as I say on every show I've done for the past 2 years, I'm all about the children. I'm 100% motivated by the children, and I'm 100%.
I really did expect a lot more of that talk about the children here in Washington, given the issues that were on the ballot. But mercifully, I didn't see nearly as much of that as I expected.
I think we got your share. We got your share in Colorado.
That is a good break for me, I guess, but not so much for you guys.
It's okay. We lived through it. Gentlemen, as always, it's been such a pleasure having you both on iCannabis Radio. Steve Elliott, can I count on you, please, to be with me again?
you can count on me.
I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled. We definitely want updates. But not only that, next time we're going to talk more than about 502. I know that 502 and 64 have definitely been on our minds, and we've talked about so much. But there's so much more in cannabis culture that I want to talk with you about.
I look forward to that, and I always enjoy sharing the microphone with my esteemed colleague, Warren. I learn something every time that man talks.
Good talking with you guys as well, and thanks for keeping everybody updated, Steve.
Absolutely.
All right, I enjoyed it.
And Warren, I'm not going to ask you. I'm just going to say thank you so much, because I know you'll be on the show again, right, babe?
Yeah, whatever.
Okay. And Warren, if people want to get in touch with you, the best way to do that is?
Calling the office number, which they keep playing on the ad, or warrenedson@hotmail.com.
And Steve, best way for people to read your blog and get in touch with you. And tell us about your book real quick.
TokeTheTown.com, SeattleWeekly.com's pot reviews are called Toke Signals, and the Little Black Book of Marijuana if you want to go in depth.
And you should, and everyone should own a copy or two, or in my case, 4, actually.
4 copies is good.
4 copies is where I'm at right now. Thank you so much, both of you. We've been talking to Steve Elliott from Toke the Town and Warren Edson, an attorney in Denver. We've got a couple things going on really quick that I want to tell you about before we sign off for the night. The Industry White Ball Award Ceremony and fundraiser for the Cash Hyde Foundation in Denver is happening on December 19th at Castleman's at 2620 Walnut Street. Please check it out. It is going to be a wonderful event. There are going to be awards for all kinds of people in the industry in Colorado, as well as there'll be a Patient of the Year award, which will be presented to the family of the young Cash Hyde who passed away in November. And as I said, the fundraising efforts will all go towards the Cash Hyde Foundation. Please check that out. It is to raise money for what are called reggae runners, which are little wagons that are given to kids who are in hospitals, and so they can leave their rooms and bring all of their equipment with them, and so on and so forth. It's a fantastic evening and wonderful foundation to give to. Really quick, I just want to tell people about the President Bruce Benson of the University of Colorado sent a letter to alumni just talking about how he was personally opposed to Amendment 64 and worked in his own time to defeat it, and it passed, and he is worried about the implications and wants to make sure that everyone knows that marijuana will not be okay in his school. He says they've worked hard to fight the image of CU as a party school, and they don't like that at all, and will definitely be thoughtful about and worried about what the 420 event looks like, and they're going to ban marijuana on their campuses. So just wanted you to be aware of that little piece of information in case you were thinking that CU was going to somehow make marijuana okay. This week on iCannabis Radio, of course, we have a great lineup. Sexpot Radio tomorrow night from 8 to 10. And then Thursday afternoon, our drive home show. The Hemp Connoisseur magazine is doing their show from 4 to 5. And Overgrow the Radio from 7 to 9 with our dear friend Stickman. Next week is on Monday night, I will have our cannabis history lesson. And then the next 2 weeks, we're going to have Monday and Tuesday is going to be stay at home with our family night for Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, New Year's Eve Day, and New Year's Eve. So please listen to recorded shows on those days. Thanks to our sponsor, Mile High Wellness, Noto Urban Garden Supply, Cuffle Collimore and Company, Edson Maton and Mats, Medical Marijuana of the Rockies, Medical Marijuana 101, and Run on Grass. It's been a pleasure as always. Look forward to talking to you guys next week. Thanks so much for listening to Monday Night on iCannabis Radio. See you later.